What's up guys, I'm Seth. The term console killer has been thrown around a lot lately, and it usually falls into one of two categories. One is the best used parts PC that you can build under a certain budget, like say $250 or $300. Usually taking a large Optiplex or other pre-built PC and putting a GPU and maybe a power supply inside of it. These computers will usually outperform consoles at the same price, but there are drawbacks. One, they're usually too big or too ugly to fit into a living room space. Consoles are usually small, they fit into a living room space pretty easily, and let's just face it, they're just usually nicer to look at. There's also the matter of features that you usually miss out on with these PCs that you'd usually like to have in a full desktop PC, such as USB 3 ports, an SSD, built-in Wi-Fi, etc. Now the second type of console killer PC that you might see is one that fixes all the problems I just talked about. It's small, it looks nice, it fits into a living room space well, it's powerful. But there's one huge drawback: price. So my quest with this video was, could I build a computer that had high performance, a small footprint, and was cheap? Now to start, I had a few goals coming into this. One, I want it to be under $300. Two, I wanted performance that beats the PS4 and gets close to, if not matches, the PS4 Pro. And number three, I'd want full features that I'd want in my own desktop PC, something like an SSD, Wi-Fi, USB 3 ports, and just overall good CPU performance. 4. I wanted the entire PC to fit easily into a living room setup, not taking up too much more space than, say, an original Xbox One. My first breakthrough was finding a Dell Optiplex small form factor PC on eBay that came with a 3rd gen i5, 4 gigs of RAM, and a 500 gig hard drive for just about $100. Lucky for me, the hard drive that was included was a 2.5-inch form factor, which means I could easily fit in an SSD if I wanted. Continuing with my eBay search, I eventually came across a 128 gigabyte SanDisk SSD for only $30. And in our current raise in SSD prices, that's a really good deal. Now I also needed an additional SATA cable, and I was able to find a pack of 5 on eBay for $3, so I'm just going to count the one SATA cable as 60 cents. I then found an additional 4 gigabytes of RAM on eBay for $12.59 that matched the speed of the RAM that was already in the computer. When looking for a Wi-Fi card, I really wanted something that supported both 2.4 GHz and 5 GHz frequencies. After looking around a bit, I came across a little USB adapter from Aukey, that fit the bill perfectly. I purchased it new from Amazon for $9. The range isn't amazing, but it gets the job done. It works really well, and it actually doesn't get hot at all after a lot of usage. Now comes the meat of the build: the graphics card. And I can tell you that this was the most difficult part of the entire thing. I really wanted to put a 1050 Ti in there, but in our current shortage of GPUs, it was near impossible to fit that in the $300 budget. As you may know, we're kind of in an Ethereum mining craze a little bit. Hopefully it's getting towards the end. And it's affected the lower tier cards like the 1050 Ti a lot less than the higher tier cards. But the problem is that people who were going to buy their 570s or 1060s now are forced to go down a level and buy 1050 Ti's, which caused those to raise in price also. The low profile cards especially have been really hard to find. I've looked at B&H, Amazon, Newegg, all the different places that have held it, kept bookmarks for weeks, couldn't find anything for anything decent under, say, $160, which I wasn't going to pay for a 1050 Ti. Though after a few weeks of waiting and nothing popping up, especially on eBay things were actually more expensive, I was about ready to give up and just say, oh, I'm just build a $325 PC or something. And then it happened. On Amazon, a low-profile 1050 Ti that was used very good condition popped up for only $131. Granted, the tax brought it up to $140, but I was about, at this point, just desperate to get one for about that price. And I know refurbished cards probably won't overclock as well, but given the form factor and the size of the power supply, I wasn't really going to try to do any serious overclocking. So with everything set and my goals hopefully achieved, here's the specs on the computer I put together. Here's the price breakdown, and it all came at a total of $295.28. Now, one downside that bothers me a little bit is the lack of a Blu-ray drive. See, I'm a big fan of physical media, and I really like to play my Blu-rays, but I know a lot of people just prefer streaming because it's easier. Now, I don't have a 4K TV to test something like 4K Netflix, but I'm pretty sure with the newest NVIDIA drivers, they've allowed HEVC decoding on their cards, so I can't guarantee that 4K Netflix will work on this computer, but I'm thinking it probably will. As for gaming, this thing is great at playing things at 1080p. Here are some benchmarks. so I don't really have that many new games to test with. And I didn't want to go out and go buy, like, say, GTA 5 or The Witcher 3 just for this video. So yeah, that's really all I have for newer games. And yes, I did benchmark Minecraft, but a lot of people still play Minecraft, and you can't deny how popular the game is. So I tested with the shader that I thought was the best visuals to performance ratio. But back on subject, this console killer is mainly meant to compete with a PS4 Pro, which means 4K gaming. But can it deliver? These games are what I would call very playable if you're willing to compromise on the settings and resolution scale. The 67% resolution scale on Battlefront essentially brings it down to 1440p. I could have brought the resolution scale up a little bit, but I really wanted this game to hit an average of over 50, so I had to compromise a bit on the quality to save performance. Now, it does struggle with some newer games in 4K, and that's understandable. And it is at least close to PS4 performance, though I would expect something like an RX 470 to be needed to actually match or beat the PS4 Pro. Now, as a disclaimer, I don't actually own a 4K TV. So what I did was I went into the NVIDIA control panel and enabled Dynamic Super Resolution, which allowed me to render everything at 4K, and then essentially downscale it back to 1080p so that my TV or monitor could display it. So in some of these results, I can't say how much the 80% or 67% resolution scale has really affected the image quality because it all looks the same on my 1080p screen. But if I were to guess, I would say it probably doesn't make too much of a difference if you're sitting back on your couch watching it on a 4K TV 12 feet away. Now, if you're sitting in front of a 4K monitor, on the other hand, the difference will probably be pretty obvious. But the PS4 Pro upscales all the time, so we're not really cheating too much. Now, one great thing about PC gaming is the huge catalog of older and indie games on Steam that you can download that don't really require too much horsepower to run. And this is where this thing really shines at 4K. Now, I'll be a little honest, I'm a little upset that I wasn't able to get Ori and the Blind Forest running perfectly at 60 frames per second at all times. And there was a little bit of stuttering here and there, especially towards the beginning of the game. But as I played it more, it really seemed to go away, and it was what I'd call overall very smooth and very playable. Now, what about the thermals, the noise, and the power? Now, this thing did get a bit loud on its own, but that was mainly due to the CPU fan. The GPU fan stayed pretty quiet. Downloading a program called SpeedFan allowed me to turn the volume down to acceptable levels. With the tweaked settings, it was actually quite a bit quieter than a PS4 that I had around to test with. And doing anything like watching movies, it was utterly silent. Running Heaven Benchmark for about 30 minutes with an ambient temperature of 72 degrees, I saw a maximum temp of 82°C. During benchmarking games, I never saw it go up over 79°C, which isn't great, but it's far away from what I'd call dangerous. If it were closer to 90°C, then I'd probably be worried. Running IDA 64 for about 30 minutes, the hottest core hit a maximum of 78°C. But the readings were constantly changing up and down, back and forth. Clearing the settings and letting it run further for a little bit longer showed an average of about 71 degrees on the hottest core. Now, this isn't bad at all for the size of this computer and the low amount of noise that it was putting out. But you may be wondering, can this 240 watt power supply really handle all these components without exploding? And the answer is yes. Quite comfortably, actually. Power readings at the wall with IDA 64 and Heaven Benchmark running simultaneously showed it never go above 160 watts. I don't know the efficiency and the overall quality of this power supply, but I would say it has a pretty decent amount of headroom before you have to worry about anything exploding. So in conclusion, was I successful in creating a true console killer? I would say yes. I'd still like to have a Blu-ray reader, preferably a UHD one, but I know that they don't even make those in slim form factor yet, so I'd have to use like a SATA to USB cable or something. And I also think that the performance might be a little bit below that of a PS4 Pro, but again, I don't have a PS4 Pro to check on hand, but I do know that's at least close to what a PS4 Pro can do. But overall, I'm very happy with it. If you were to try to build this thing, you'd probably end up spending upwards of $350 to $400, depending on what's available at the time. But as a PS4 Pro replacement at the same price, I would say it's worth it. Granted, it is using all used parts, while at $400 will get you a new PS4 Pro with a controller and a warranty and all that. And if you're someone who's kind of overwhelmed by this kind of thing and you don't want to go through all the hassle of troubleshooting your own hardware and software, then this may not be for you. Then by all means, buy a PS4 Pro or other console. I mean, it's your money, I'm not going to tell you how to spend it. But if you want the best value out of your money for a great home theater PC that can do just about anything, I mean, it is a full computer after all, I would say go for something like this. I'm sure you won't regret it. Unless, of course, you get really unlucky and then some component breaks outside of the 30-day eBay return period, but that probably won't happen. But you have to be realistic when buying used parts. I mean, crap happens. And I can't be held responsible if you build something like this and then something goes wrong. There's always a risk, but for me, I'd say the risk is low enough that I'd say it's worth it. I've put together at least a dozen different computers in the past with used parts and pre-built computers, and I've never had a problem, but your mileage may vary. Thank you for watching. Do all the YouTube stuff if you feel so inclined, and bye. Yeah, come back to me.
Oh, the beans. Oh no, it looks...
It was such a good looking shot. Okay. Here we go. Take two.